Well, let's talk about everyone's favorite subject, taxes.
Taxes. We're here with Kelli Buchannon from Cumberland County. Tell us about taxes.
Okay. So I am the current assessor of property for Cumberland County. Our office is located in the Milo Limerick building across from the courthouse. We're across from the trustee's office across the hall there from where you pay your taxes typically. But basically what we do is we are responsible for valuing the property in Cumberland County, whether that be business, commercial, residential. And we administer the reappraisal program, which is by law we have to do at least every 5 years in Tennessee. Some counties do a 6, but Cumberland County has opted to do a 5. And so basically it's a delayed reappraisal. With that delayed reappraisal, there are the last one was in 2022. And so at that time, we readjust the values based off the current market sales for the previous year. Those values basically stay. They set base rates for the properties, and those values stay. That's what we use in our system to value things for the next 5 years. So even if you have someone that builds a home in, we did it in 2022, but if they build a home in 2024, the base rates in our system are still going to be what was set from the 2022 revaluation. So it is somewhat of a delayed reappraisal. We do have, I always tell people, especially when they're getting into sales and real estate and things like that, we're behind. So don't necessarily go off of your property record card with your appraisal with us for what you should list your house for. And so our next one will be in 2027, and we'll look at all the qualified sales from 2026 to set those values. Now, with that being said, Tennessee also has a certified tax rate. And so when we do have a revaluation, the counties are not allowed to make any more money than what they make the previous year. They can't, because if we raise the values and we raise the taxes, they would have a windfall basically. And so what they do once we have set those values, if they have increased, which right now market obviously increases every year, then the certified tax rate has to come back down. And the county would still have to bring in, if they brought in, it's, say simple math, $5 million, it would be way more than that, but they couldn't bring in any more than $5 million the next year from what was currently there. New construction and things can add to that, but so what we saw in 2022 was the tax rate was at 1.56, and it actually went down to 1.13 for the county. And then, of course, you have your city taxes, and they went down with that certified rate as well. So it's kind of it's different in each state. People move here, and they really try to understand it because it's very different from state to state. But that's the basics of how the valuation system works for Cumberland County and for Tennessee. So
Okay, so just to clarify,
yes,
because in 2022, almost everyone's property values increased
Yes.
because of what happened after COVID. Our
Absolutely.
market just went crazy. But the tax rate came down
It did.
to balance things out a little bit.
Yes.
So even though your property values are higher, your
Correct.
taxes only went up a little bit because of the tax rate being
Exactly.
decreased.
Yes, and so what you see, and when I say that the county can't bring in any more money than they did the previous year, you're going to have some people dependent in different markets, different areas, because when they're looking at the sales and they're adjusting the values for different places, some neighborhoods do have, more increased higher sales than what some others did, and some may go down. So individuals may see, you might have somebody that did see a slightly higher tax bill when it was all calculated, and you might have somebody that had a slightly lower one, but in this grand scheme of things, it stays
About
roughly
the
the
same.
same. Yeah.
And so then the 5-year cycle is when you come out and reassess the property, and that's the only time the taxes change, except when? Are there, because there are some exceptions like new construction.
Yes.
Right.
So when we come out, so we visually review a property, of course, when there's a new construction. So we get building permits, things like that, and that flags us to go look at the property. And so we go out, we measure, we do, all all the entry, we sketch out the building and take pictures and put that, go ahead and give it a value again based off the base rates of the last reappraisal.
Right.
And so then after that, we really don't look at it again until that new property will be slid into our reappraisal cycle as far as the visual inspection goes, which in years 1 through 4 of the reappraisal cycle, we review 25% of the parcels in the county per year.
Okay.
So if you build, let's say you add a storage building, that we come out on year 1 and you're on the year 1 review cycle, and you add that storage building to your property the following year, we're probably not going to know that. We're not going to see that until 4 years later when we're back again. And so we would add anything when we come out for that review. We would add if we see an actual new addition, if you built onto your house or if you added the storage building or anything like that, if there were any improvements. But as far as just changing the value of your home itself, if it's exactly as it was the last time we were there, nothing's going to change until that reappraisal year.
And that's one thing that people ask is
Yes.
they think when they purchase the property for a higher price than the tax appraisal value, then their tax bill's going to go up.
Right.
And so you're saying that doesn't happen
It does not
unless
happen.
there's some major change.
There's not, and we're highly monitored. There's something that they refer to as sales chasing, and it's something that we are not allowed to do. We don't just throw the value on there because of what it sold for recently. Now I do think there are some different things coming down the pipeline with the state as far as maybe more frequent reappraisals and things like that. But as far as how it's set up right now, they're pretty much getting, like I said, anywhere between a 1 and 5 year delay in their values, and that would stay that way until it's changed, and it has to go through multiple stages to be changed. So,
Well, and you talked about the tax rate,
Yeah.
1.13%.
Yes.
Can you tell us how that's calculated
Sure.
based on the value of the home?
yeah, so residential property is valued at 25% of the assessment, or it's assessed at 25% of the value. And so if easy math, if you had a $100,000 home, what we do is we take 25% of that, and that's the only thing that's taxed.
So you pay 1.13% on $25,000.
On 25%.
Well,
yes. Yeah,
with
if
your
it was
example.
$100,000.
Yeah, with your
yes.
100,000 example.
Yes, if you had $1 million house, you paid on $250,000.
Right.
Now, how is that percentage calculated?
So the state sets out the guidelines as far as what we do the 25% on the and then commercial, of course, is 40%. And then the calculation, are you talking about just the calculation for?
Yeah, for the 25%. Does that come off your appraisal?
It does,
Okay.
yeah. So it's the total value of the property. So you'll have your land value, your improvement value for anything that's on the property. And if that on the total appraisal amount on your property record card, we take 25% of that, and then we multiply that times the tax rate, 1.13 for county. And then if you live in the city as well, then you would have that additional, it's approximately 60 cents added to that as well. So.
Okay, so that's not how much actually, like if we see an appraisal or if we're trying to figure a price to sell a home, we look at that tax record.
Yeah.
But it's usually lower than what we would list the house for.
It's much lower.
Yes.
And yes. And so, and like I was saying, with us having that delayed reappraisal, that, we always tell people, so the state does something called a ratio study. And because we are on the delayed reappraisal, at least every 2 years, they have to do a ratio study for each county. Now that it gets into a whole other can of worms that I won't go into with the ratio study, but essentially what it's doing is they are checking to see how much behind our values are from the market. And so we had a ratio study in 2024, and it was showing that what we had valued from the 2022 reappraisal was about 25% below market right now. Now they'll do another ratio study this spring that will pull the values from the sales from this past year. And that'll kind of give us a much better idea. Some counties, they see a 50% difference by the second ratio year that they have before their reappraisal. I'm hopeful that it won't be that high. I don't really think that it's going to be. But that kind of gives us some insight into how it's going to go once we get to that reappraisal year too. So,
yeah, I would agree with that 25% number. That's about what we typically see. I mean, some are closer than others, obviously, but that's pretty close. Yeah. And then buyers want to make an offer based on that number.
Yes.
It's like, no, that's not. That's not the realistic value of the home.
Exactly.
So, and it's not going to be the same as if you hire an appraiser to come out and do an appraisal of your house.
Well, and I think it's important, which you all are probably, working with fee appraisers, you understand this completely, but an appraisal is good for one day in time. And so anything in the market can change. You can have 5 sales down the road the next day that are, astronomical, and it can change, it can change an appraisal. There's so many different factors that go into it. So that's what we get into that a lot with if we have people who are appealing their values is, they may bring in an appraisal from a fee appraiser that was done 3 years difference from when we did it. And so that's the issue there is, just those appraisals are good for that one day. And we even say that too for us. Like I said, if we come out on Monday and you build have a garage and a storage building installed on Tuesday,
it's different.
Right. Yeah, it's
completely
different. So.
And so how do you appraise? I mean, I know what a fee appraisal looks like. They're looking for 3 comparable properties.
Yes.
And you're talking about, you look at the previous 5 years sales history.
Yes.
But do they do the same kind of appraisal? I mean, for every property, are you looking for comparable properties?
So what we do, so basically when we come out on new constructions, they are looking at the bones of the building. We're looking at square footage. We're looking at how many rooms, how many fixtures, how many bathrooms, those sorts of things. They look at whether the porches are finished or not finished, and all of the how many angles the the home has, and those sorts of things. And so that one, when they're doing that, the new construction add-on, that one is really very detailed. And then after that, a lot of times the field workers will be able to kind of go in and walk through at that time because it's usually still under construction, and they're able to just, kind of go in and look. But after that, we never go in the home again.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
So you don't know if it has...
We don't know.
Gold fixtures.
Exactly. Yeah, we started, because like I said, our office is responsible for the valuation, but there are certain things in our office that we list on property record cards or that they have in the past that don't drive a value for us. So your house, if your property record card says you have carpet and you have tile, or none of that drives a value.
Which matters in our market.
It does.
But it's not reflected in your appraisal.
It's not. We're looking at square footage. We're looking at finish tops. Obviously brick versus siding, those sorts of things, metal roof versus shingle roof. And those all have values built in that the state basically builds into our system.
Okay.
And they pull that data again from the base rates from the last reappraisal.
Okay.
So.
Then the other thing that we hear a lot is square footage.
Yes.
So you measure exterior square footage.
Yes.
Except in, like, for example, a bonus room above a garage where the walls are less than full height.
Right.
Can you talk about that?
Sure. So we do try to pick up everything, but we have different ways that we rate it. So we may have areas that are actually, they're marked as finished square footage, and then we have some that may be, an upper story unfinished or an unfinished basement or things like that. And so sometimes they know that, and sometimes they don't. If they get to a new construction and they don't know that they can't see that it has a basement, and they don't know, and they can't go in or they can't talk to anybody, they may not know, and it may not get picked up. Some people are happy with that, and some people aren't. Some people,
when they get ready to sell, they're not happy with that.
Exactly. So I always tell everybody, there's always a chance that something might be incorrect or whatever, but we have people come in a lot that'll ask us, and we can come out and do a field check anytime if they have a question. And sometimes there's been things, if they were picked up, if it was an older house that's been remodeled or something like that, they want us to come out and look at it again. And so we're happy to do that anytime if there's ever a discrepancy or anything like that. We've really been trying to clean up some of the things that we've been finding lately. So
I mean, we find Cumberland County to be fairly accurate.
Yeah.
Some of the other counties, not so much.
yeah.
But then back to like the bonus room square
Yes.
footage. I think you guys count if the walls are less than a certain height, and I don't remember what that number is. It's only
Yeah.
like 60% of the actual floor square footage.
Yeah,
And-
the computer system builds it out. I couldn't tell you off the top of my head exactly what it is. Now, one of our field appraisers could probably tell you like that because they do it every day.
Well, but it's a percentage. I think
Yeah.
it's 60%, and then
Yeah.
we see some discrepancies sometimes when a fee appraiser goes out. Then
Right.
they value it based on floor square footage,
Right.
and so sometimes that's a little bit different. And people are like, "Oh no, I have the wrong square footage on my
Yeah.
house," and it's really not. It's just the way that they
That makes
calculate it is a
sense.
little bit different, I think.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. Yeah, and there's a lot of different calls that they have, like I said, for different types of rooms and different types of finishes and things like that would look maybe different on our end versus if a fee appraiser does it. I always say, and the fee appraisers and us as well, we participate in the International Association of Assessing Officers, and so there's a lot of national and worldwide standards that the fee appraisers go by also. But at the end of the day, they know they're doing it. I mean, it's
Right.
It's to drive a sale. It's
Right.
to drive a value, and so our main focus in our office is to just make sure that everything's done fairly, that we're doing it accurately, that House A is being valued and assessed the same way that House B is if they're similar.
The consistency.
Yes, consistency for us, because it's mass appraisal, and I always tell people too, mass appraisal is so much different than one individual appraisal.
Well,
And so
to do one fee appraisal is probably I don't even know, a 6 or 7 hour process,
Exactly.
and you
Yes.
just can't
Yeah.
go out
So
into the
it's much
county.
more
and-
detailed.
Right.
It's much more detailed and again for a specific purpose, and so. You're going to see some differences with that. A lot of times when we get into appeals, if someone doesn't agree with their value, whether they say it's too high or it's too low, then we kind of transition as we're looking at it into kind of more of what a fee appraiser would do, and looking at the individuals and then pulling more comps and doing things like that. So, but typically only during a reappraisal time is really when we're looking at comps and things like that to figure out what those values should be for that cycle.
Another thing that I hear a lot is senior citizens shouldn't have to pay property tax. Well, and we know from living in Cumberland County, where we're a very heavily retired county,
Yes.
we wouldn't have any income if
We
that
wouldn't.
happened. But is there a break for senior citizens in Tennessee, and what does that process look like?
Yes, so Tennessee does offer property tax relief. The amounts vary from year to year. As I was mentioning, the sales ratio studies that we do, on those ratio years, the senior tax relief does get a little bit lower for those people, and I won't go into that. But so it does vary from year to year. It's not a set amount. But the trustee's office is actually the one that administers that program. And so there's an online portal where people can sign up for it through the state, and then they can actually get on there and track it. And keep up with it that way. But we have brochures at our office. They have brochures across the hall at
Okay.
the trustee's office, and they can walk them completely through that process as far as how to get signed up. So
And it's income based, I think, right? It's
Yes.
not just age, it's age and
yes,
income
there's
based.
income, and then of course if you have your disabled veterans and things like that, they also fall under that category. So there's several programs if different from, like, veterans are different from just from seniors and those sorts of things.
So they can go to the trustee's office
Yes.
and get all of that information.
Yes.
And then, having said that we need that money to run the county, can you talk just a little bit about where the property tax dollars go in Cumberland County?
Yeah.
What does it fund?
Absolutely. So schools is a huge, schools are a huge portion of what the property taxes fund. And then you have all of your county offices, obviously. Each year, each county office will put into the county commission what they're going to need to operate their office for the year. So that includes, of course, all the salaries and expenses and things like that. The county recently, I can't remember if it was, I guess it's been about 2 years ago, they did do a stipend to the road department, but typically the road department operates off of gas tax.
Yes.
So unless the county commission decides to just give money to the roads, that's usually not something that you see. But the majority goes to the schools, and then, of course, all the other county expenses that they have.
And so paying those property taxes is really the only way the county has money to operate,
Yes,
other than
absolutely.
the gas taxes and a little bit of money from the state that comes into the schools.
Yes.
But that's a pretty minimal amount.
Yeah.
It's very minimal
Yeah.
considering how huge, land mass wise our
yeah.
county is.
It is. Well, and it's, it's interesting because even with our office, it's, some things are based off population for us and how we get, how many how they pay some people and do different things. But then if you look at, our population isn't, it's not gigantic, but our land area is huge.
Yes.
So for us in the assessor's office, it's a big, we've got a very large geographical region to cover, but we don't necessarily have the population to get, all the resources sometimes that we need, but we make it work. So,
And where do we rank in the state as far as taxes? Do you know?
we're still very low. We're not, I know we're definitely in the top 10 of the lowest.
I was thinking at one
taxes.
point we were number 4.
Yeah,
like
we
fourth
were
from the bottom.
We were at one point. I think that's changed recently.
Okay.
You've had a lot of counties that have just recently. So, every county in the state does their reappraisal cycle at a different time.
Oh, okay. So it changes
it
a little bit.
fluctuates a lot.
Okay.
Yeah, they and some counties are on. Like I said, some counties do a 2 or 3 year reappraisal. So you have a lot of counties that just had a reappraisal, and then their certified tax rate is coming down. And so since we've had that same certified tax rate since 2022, usually the closer we get to reappraisal, before reappraisal, you'll see us bump up that we're kind of
that makes
higher
sense.
taxes, but then it'll usually come back down.
But we're still very low. I mean, out
Absolutely.
of 95 counties in the state, being in the lowest
Yes.
10 is
Absolutely.
a good thing for
Absolutely.
us.
Yeah.
And
How
we-
would you say we compare to like Knoxville or Cookeville? Do you know what their rates are?
So they are quite a bit higher. I couldn't tell you Cookeville's off the top of my head, but I know that it is quite a bit higher than what ours is. They have, and I think a lot of it too. I think our county commissioners do they're very mindful with their spending, and they really, try to sit down and figure out how they can make everything work. And I think, we all try to be very good stewards of our money that we get. So I think it's just, again, just making sure that you keep those people in there that, that are mindful of what they're spending.
Yeah, I think they do a great job.
Yeah.
And I mean, we see counties that have much less than we have, whose
Yeah.
tax dollars are much higher, tax
Yes.
rates are much higher.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
I think Cumberland County really has a lot of bang for their buck.
Yes.
The commissioners do a good job.
Yeah, and they've done really good. They recently gave the, all the county employees got raises last year, and that was a big step, I think, in the right direction. Just to keep the offices running well and have good people be able to maintain them. But they're very good with balancing.
And it's a
doing what they need to
balancing
do.
act. I
It
mean,
is.
we need this, but we only have this.
Exactly.
We've got to make this work, or else
Yes.
taxes have to go up, right?
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
Exactly.
can't have everything.
Yeah, and we've been very fortunate, like I said, once they adopted that certified tax rate, because ultimately they can, at that reappraisal year when they adopt that certified tax rate, they have to do it that year, but they don't have to do it the next year.
Oh, okay.
They could bring it down to 1.13, that certified tax year, and then they could say, hey, we need to do this, and they could bump it right back up to 1.56 like it was the next year if they wanted to.
And that's just controlled by the county commission, so they have the power
They
to do that.
have the power to set the tax rate. That is who sets the tax rate.
So if we would need, I don't know, more or better roads or, internet or something
Yeah.
like that, they could bump it up with
They
that
could.
in mind.
Yes.
But I think it's pretty amazing that our tax rate came down.
I
Yes.
when does that happen?
When values
Right.
were so crazy high.
Yeah. Well, and they say, that there's lots of talk at the legislative level about, there's different groups that are trying to change the tax structure in Tennessee and all this. And it's like, hey, it seems to work really great. I think, different counties have their own set of issues. But I think as far as, around here, I think it works really well for us. And everybody seems to have what they need. And so I'm very thankful to be a part of a community that, that is able to handle everything.
I agree.
The way that they do.
Yeah, I agree. I think we live in an awesome place, and it's very affordable, and I hope it stays that way.
Yes.
The calls that we get that we chuckle about sometimes are people ask what the property tax is on a house, and then they
Yes.
say, "Oh, and that's per month, right?"
Yes, I was going to say
Yes.
that was going to be my next thing, that we get people that come in as well and say, now that's for the month or the quarter, and no, it's not. It's for the year. So.
Yeah.
Yes, it's
Yeah.
a typo. You left off a zero or two,
Yes.
and like, no,
Yeah.
No, this
that's
is
actually the
real.
tax here.
Yeah.
And even if you're paying city taxes, it's still a really big value compared to these
is.
people who are moving from other places.
Absolutely.
And the thing that they have to remember is back to this balancing act, because we are paying such a little amount. You can't go out and say, well, we need this and we should have this, and why don't we have that?
Exactly.
And because it's all coming from this one
It
pot of
is.
property tax
well,
dollars.
And I tell everybody, there's so many things. It's simple economics. We've had, some people say, well, talking about the values going up, and, there's so many people moving here from different places, and they'll pay, they sell their house here and they sell it, because it's worth way more, and they can just come in and pay whatever they want to. And I said, well, the people that have lived here forever are accepting the money. So that's what changes our values.
And it helps our community.
It does.
It is hard. I mean, I do feel bad for people who are just starting out and they're trying to buy their first home,
Yes.
because values did skyrocket.
They have.
But on the flip side, then it brings a lot of money into our community to
It
help
does.
the schools and the
Yes, it
the
does.
projects.
And, the new construction, and that's something that, that's one of the reasons I think, just from what I've seen, that we've not had to raise the tax rate, is because you're seeing that growth, and that growth picks up year over year. And so that drives additional revenue in for the county. And so as long as that new growth is happening and we're having more construction and we're having more businesses come in, that is essentially keeping the taxes
Holds
lower
everything else.
for the residents that have been here. So
Do you happen to know how many new constructions were added to the tax rolls last year?
in 2025, I would say that we've had probably, I think right now we've got about 300 that we're looking
Wow.
at just picking up in the next
And that's
few
more than I
months.
would have even thought.
Yes.
I mean, we see
Yeah.
it, but I guess I haven't really looked
So
at a number.
well, and so we have, of course, the Flat Rock.
True.
They're
They're condos.
they're building a lot, and
Yeah.
those are all divided out into they'll be individual owned spots, and so those that was one gigantic parcel of land, and now
Including
they're-
that, I would have thought the number would be higher.
Yes.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I guess it's kind of hard to wrap your head around. You see it going on, but
Yes.
I've not really.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Taken
it seems like
Yeah.
they're building everywhere.
Well, we've
Yeah.
but
definitely
really,
we've
it's
definitely
not.
had more. No, we've definitely had more than 300 this year. We've got 300 right now that we're in the process of picking up. So.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So.
And that's probably the difference. Our community's growing where other communities are not growing, so their taxes are going up.
Correct.
Yeah, I think that would make sense. Some of the smaller counties that
Yes.
aren't having that kind of development, their tax
Absolutely.
rate has to go up just because inflation is costing more for everything.
Absolutely. Well, and you see some of these when when there is a reappraisal, and I talk about the state, telling us what that certified tax rate is. There have been some counties. It doesn't happen often, but they are not required to accept that certified tax rate if it's going to cause them to have a problem. But they have to go through a big, long
There's a
process
process.
and have public hearings and things like that if they're going to not accept that tax rate. And so there have been some smaller counties that haven't had as much growth that have had to do that at different points, but we've always accepted it here. I don't foresee there ever being an issue with it anytime in the near future. So,
Another thing that we're asked about a lot is Greenbelt.
yeah.
And I know that this is a big topic,
Yes.
but
Yes.
just can you brush the
Absolutely.
surface of it and kind of talk about what it
Yes.
means?
So basically, what Greenbelt provides is that we would look at, rather than the market value of a property, we would look at its use value. So if you have 30 acres and you are using that for farm, you could be using it to grow crops. You could have livestock, basically any farming activities going on there. If you have a forest, you can use that as well. So there are a few different things. If it is going to be under the forest portion, you do have to have a forest plan, and there are foresters that can help you get that done. We can help direct you where to go on that. But they changed the law recently for Tennessee that there was a limit of 1,500 acres per person that they could have under Greenbelt. And so they just recently increased that to 3,000. So any person in the state of Tennessee can have up to 3,000 acres in Greenbelt that is only taxed on its or valued on its use rather than the actual market value. Now, what you get into with that is if you have a property that's under Greenbelt and you sell it or you divide it up, it is subject to some rollback taxes for the last 5 years that you've had it. And we calculate those and send those out if that's the case. If a property exchanges owners, the new owner will need to come in and re-sign the property back up for Greenbelt once they purchase it. So once the closing happens and the deed is recorded at the Register of Deeds office, we get that in our computer system, and then we get that transferred over for the property owner. And at that time, if it was under Greenbelt, that flags us, and we send them out a notice to let them know that they need to come back in and sign up. And they usually have almost a year. They have to have, the cutoff is in the spring for the previous year.
Okay.
So they have plenty of time to get it done. And so we send several letters out reminding people, hey, we need to sign you back up under Greenbelt or whatever. And it's a very easy process. They fill out their application. Like I said, if it is going to be under forest, they do have to have a forest plan that they give to us. And then we fill out the application. They have to take it across the street to the Register of Deeds office and have it registered and recorded, and it's just pay the fee for that. And then we get it all set up in our system and get the values changed over. So.
And the minimum is 15 acres
Yes.
that is being used for all 15 acres have to be used for agriculture, or they just have to own 15 acres?
It has to be 15 acres, but you're allowed a home site on it. So whatever that looks like for you, I mean, obviously it wouldn't be, multiple tiny homes on it everywhere. But if you have your home and maybe a garage and a shed or, whatever, you are allowed pretty much, they say kind of approximately 1 acre of a home site. But, obviously your outbuildings and stuff more than likely would be used for your agriculture purposes.
Right.
So, so we're not coming by with a magnifying glass on that.
But you couldn't be using 12 acres for your house and manicured lawn and then...
Correct. Yes. So.
And approximately how much does that reduce the taxes? Do you know?
Not off the top
varies.
of my head. It does vary based off the area, the topography. There's a lot of different calculations that go into it that they don't even let us touch.
Okay.
So
I know it makes a pretty big difference. I just wondered if
it's a large difference.
Especially if you own a large tract of land.
Yes. And like I said, they basically it pretty much keeps it away from the market value section, which is what we're looking at when we're comparing what all the sales have been for all the years. So just pretty much what they're able to use it for and make on it. So
yeah, I think I've read open space also qualifies.
Yes, open space does qualify. Open space, and this was like we were talking before we started recording, but that the Greenbelt handbook is thick. It's so thick, and they're always adding more to it and adding different court cases and things for you to read, because there's just so many different caveats to it. But open space, we don't have, I think we have one property in the county that's listed under open space right now. And so it's very rare that we see it happen. And I think that it actually does have to be, it references in there, and we do have a county planning commission, so it references in there that the open space has to be designated by the planning commission to be able to use it for that portion. So we were just reading over that the other day at the office, and trying to, we always pull these things out for different reasons, and talk through them. But yeah, we don't have many open space.
And when you say open space, what would that mean?
Pretty much. So like if you had an area that you wanted to designate, obviously your state parks and stuff are state and they're exempt and all of that. But if you privately had, an open field that you wanted to make it just a public open space area for people to come.
So it would have to be public, or?
Yes.
So it's really just kind of conserving the land for some
Yes.
sort of use.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. I didn't realize that. I hadn't heard that.
Yeah, I didn't either.
And I will, something else while we're on that subject, it's not necessarily on the Greenbelt subject, but talking about, we've had a lot of people that come in and ask about having cemeteries near their home. Or there's TikTok videos everywhere that say, hey, if you bury your family member on your property, you don't have to pay property taxes. That is not true.
Okay.
It is not true. I've been trying to tell everybody that everywhere, because we had tons of calls about it. We can section off an area for however many graves are in an area. But when you make it a cemetery, it is a public cemetery. It has to have access. It has to have, and you can't block people from getting to it. And usually the tax savings for like one grave may be like 15 cents a year. It's not.
Interesting.
It's not much. So
It's not worth your
It
while.
is not.
It's
spend way more money meeting the requirements for the cemetery than you would to
Plus,
save on taxes.
not everyone wants to buy a house with the
Correct.
cemetery
No.
next to it.
Yes.
So
So
from the real estate side,
Exactly. So I try to throw that into everybody. I'm like, it is not a tax break.
I haven't seen those TikTok
Yeah.
videos. Interesting.
Yeah.
That's one question I haven't gotten lately.
No.
So now you know.
Now we know.
No.
Have seen some with private cemeteries on them, but I
Yeah.
haven't heard the TikTok side
Yeah.
of that. Well, is there anything else? I mean, this has been great. You've given us a lot of good information, answered a lot of questions that we get asked.
Yeah.
Anything
Yeah.
you can think of that we
No,
haven't
just
covered?
Our taxes come due
Oh, good point.
in
Yeah.
October. And we have until February
You do
to
have
pay
until
for
February
those.
to pay for those, and you pay those with the trustee's office. They have some options for online paying, or you can, of course, go into their office. They're open Monday through Friday. So
Now, another question I get asked is, how long are the lines when you come into the office?
well, it depends.
There might be
For-
3 people or none.
Yes, correct. Yeah, sometimes it has been lined up, out since they've opened up the online payment system.
That's
it's
what we were
really
saying
not-
earlier. I
Yes.
love the online
Yeah.
payment
Me too.
system.
Yeah, it was. I was telling Cheryl when we first got here this morning. I said last year. I said I work right across the office. I said I had my stack of my tax bills, and I had to take those over there and pay them. And that day they were lined up a little bit, but they still got me through very quick. So they do a good job
Yeah.
at being pretty efficient.
Yeah, a little bit here is a lot different than a little bit in other
Exactly.
places.
Oh,
it's,
yeah.
it's minutes,
Yeah.
not
Yes.
Minutes,
half
not
hours or
hours.
hours.
Oh yeah, if it's if you wait 5 minutes around here, it's
It's a
an
long time.
inconvenience. Yeah. So.
Yes.
And the website to pay online is TennesseeTrustee.org, or do you have a different one
I
that?
believe so. There's it's a citizen portal now. I think they just changed the website.
Okay.
But they can get on the Cumberland County website and find that information.
Yeah.
And then of course ours for assessments is CumberlandCountyAssessor.org, and we have all kinds of resources and videos and forms, and you can change your address on there. You can do lots of
okay.
different things. So it's got a pretty good amount of information on it.
You just mentioned addresses. So when someone
Yes.
registers a deed in the Register of Deeds office, that comes to you to update their
Yes.
mailing address. So
Yes.
they should then get their tax bill the following year. They may need to follow up
Yes.
if they haven't seen
Well,
something in
and
October.
what we see too happens a lot is if someone lives out of state and they buy a piece of property and they don't move here for another year, if their mailing address at that time that they bought that property was in Maryland,
Then the tax bill went
the
to
tax
Maryland.
bill went to Maryland. And so make sure that if you buy something, make sure if you do have a change of address before, or after that or whatever, that, update that with us as well.
Yeah, I think
so that
most
we
of the
know.
time it's a forwarding problem because
Yes.
that Maryland address, maybe they forward that address, but forwarding runs out before the tax
It
bill
does,
comes
exactly.
out.
Yeah,
And-
most of the time, forwarding does not seem to work. Anything we send out, we always get, tons of those back. And I think
And
it
you
is
don't know where
just,
to-
you would just have that certain time window for the forwarding.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Okay. And then delinquent taxes, how long does it stay delinquent before it gets turned into?
So I believe it's 2 years. We don't handle any of the delinquency things. I believe it's 2 years. It'll sit in the trustee's office, and then once that happens, then it goes over to the clerk and master. They do have, of course, and a lot of people ask about delinquent tax properties and like purchasing those and things. The county mayor's office is actually the one that handles all the delinquent tax properties that we have for sale right now. So they can just reach out to the mayor's office and get that list and go through that process. But yeah, we in our office don't deal with it.
But they need to be
much.
paid
Yes.
before this process starts because then it's
Exactly.
much harder to
Absolutely.
get that property caught back up.
Absolutely, it is, and there's lots of fees, and there's lots of lots of things that go into
And
that.
it could be
so.
sold.
It could.
At
Yes.
some point.
Absolutely.
So. All right. Well, anything else you can think of, Margot?
Just make sure you pay your taxes
Yes.
on time.
Yes.
It's coming. It'll be here before we know it,
It will.
right?
It will. It's went by very quick this
I
year.
paid mine
Yeah.
already this week.
Awesome.
Yeah, I'm holding out to the last minute. I'm going to keep my money until
Yeah.
I usually do that, but I spend it before then.
then I fool around and forget, and I'm scrambling. That's why I love the online part because at night when it crosses my mind, I can just log in
pay
and pay
online,
them.
yeah.
Exactly.
Well, thank you, Kelly. This
Thanks
has
for
been
having
great.
me.
Yes,
Yeah,
thank
I really
you.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
happy
Yeah,
to
and
come
thanks
back
for the work
anytime.
you're doing.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, I know
Happy to
this
do
is
it. It's a-
probably a thankless job most of the time, right?
Well, it's funny because it's when I start, this was never the job that I ever expected that I would have in my entire life, and I really don't even know at first why I wanted to do it. But but what I've found is everybody in property assessors, I've got to meet lots from across the state, and everybody calls it the accidental profession, and it is, but it's a lot of fun. I mean, it really is, and it's interesting seeing if you enjoy numbers, but and it's of course nice to be able to help people and explain things to people, and everyone's usually very thankful, about how it works around here.
And a lot of times they're just looking for an explanation.
Absolutely. That's one of the biggest things that we're trying to really push in the office is transparency and how it works. Because if you don't know how it works, it's, and that was always for me before I was the assessor, was no one could tell me how it worked, which made me question it. And so I just feel like, you have this person in there that's in charge of this, and it's a pretty big undertaking, and people need to know the basics of how it works. So that's our goal, is to just kind of keep everybody educated. So
Yeah. Well, thank
as
you.
simply as we can, because it's a lot.
It's a lot.
It is a lot.
But
Yeah.
knowing that you're trying to be fair and consistent
Yeah.
and there's a process, I
Yeah.
think that goes a long way toward
Absolutely.
making people happy and just giving them that no one's going to be happy about paying taxes,
Right.
but to give them
Right.
that understanding that there is this process.
Yeah.
Yeah, and to know where it goes, it stays in our community.
Exactly.
Yes.
And it's nice to have people like you serving our community,
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank
keeping
you.
it the great community that it is.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Thank you for watching. So like and share our page.
We'll
You can
put
go to Kelly's website and find out all about the property assessor's office.
Yep.
I just walked all over you.
Go ahead.